The World Health Organization pushes for an international deal on climate change to address growing health concerns. And Oscar winner Lupita Nyong'o returns to her country of birth to promote Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Climate negotiators resumed their meetings in Paris Thursday, wrestling over the language of an agreement. The talks that dragged on through the night failed to bridge gaps between rich and developing countries. French Foreign Minister and Summit President Laurent Fabius is insisting that an accord to curb the greenhouse gas emissions that are accelerating global warming must be finished by Friday. VOA's Kim Lewis caught up with Dr. A. Nara Balderdash of the Socio-Medical of Africa. Balderdash says climate negotiators must include malaria in any agreement.
I think the people who have the power, deciding, investing, can think about malaria. Malaria is killing us. We have to kill the mosquito. Kill them. We have cyclonemia that's from a mosquito. Mosquitoes are bloodsuckers. We kill them or they kill us. We need to kill them. They have to take care of the climate change is coming to help proliferate mosquito. We will get more mosquito now.
Well, we want to know what you think about issues that touch your everyday life. So each week we'll ask a question and look forward to your answers. This week our question is: how has climate change affected your community? Opue Kings Thomas from Nigeria wrote, the weather patterns this year have been so normal compared to last year when we had a lot of flooding in Nigeria. In my community, the heat during the summer is high, and it's due to global warming and an increase in carbon emissions. Well, thank you for your responses, and please keep them coming. Go to Facebook, the address is Africa54, and tell me how changes in climate affect your community. Or send me a tweet at VOA Vince Makori. We'll have more on climate change and its impact on health in just a few minutes. Well, in the global fight against violent extremism, the UN Security Council has tried to stem the flow of funds to terrorists, authorized airstrikes and other military operations against them, and imposed sanctions. On Wednesday, the Council took a new approach, looking at ways to prevent the world's young people from being recruited by these dark and dangerous groups. VOA's Margaret Bashir has the story.
The global population of young people is the highest it has ever been. There are 1.8 billion people between the ages of 10 and 24. Most live in developing countries. Many are poor, uneducated, and unemployed, putting them at risk of recruitment into militias and terrorist groups like the so-called Islamic State.
We all recognize today that young people are more vulnerable to the recruitment of these radical groups, and we have to change our approach by engaging young people as partners in fighting violent extremism. We need to fix the narrative as well, because the negative labeling for young people as part of the problem should stop.
In a Security Council resolution adopted unanimously on Wednesday to a rare round of applause, countries are called on to better protect youth in conflict zones and encourage their participation in post-conflict peace processes. The resolution also stresses the importance of addressing factors that lead to the rise of violent radicalism. Jordan's delegation drafted the text.
There is a need to step up the level of work to ensure sustainable development so that young people are not just a tool for destruction, but something that helps construction.
That means giving young people, especially those in war zones, alternatives, including access to education, vocational training, and job opportunities. It also involves social media outreach.
We know that there are almost 50,000 Twitter accounts with ISIS affiliates. Almost 90,000 tweets every day are being sent by ISIS supporters. And we have to win the battle online and offline by engaging young people.
With its resolution, the Council is recognizing that today's youth will be shaping tomorrow's world. And if it will be a peaceful and prosperous one, they must have a hand in creating it. Margaret Bashir, VOA News, the United Nations.
Well, a man in the U.S. state of Minnesota has been charged as the 10th person in an alleged conspiracy that encouraged young Somali American men to travel overseas to join the terrorist group Islamic State. Authorities say Abdirazak Mohammed Warsame, a 20-year-old who was arrested on Wednesday, also planned to make the trip abroad. U.S. prosecutors say since 2007, dozens of people from Minnesota, many young Somali American men among them, have traveled or attempted to travel overseas to support Islamic State or Al-Shabaab, a Somali-based terrorist group. Well, the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee is holding a hearing Thursday on South Sudan and its current state of failed leadership. Among the people testifying at the proceedings are State Department Special Envoy to Sudan and South Sudan Donald Booth, former Special Envoy to Sudan and South Sudan Princeton Lyman, and Adotei Okoye, Managing Director of Government Relations at Amnesty International USA. Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee had these early remarks.
In a seeming resolution to civil war, why has the leadership of the current president and the former vice president chosen to mimic the malign cartoon policies of ethnic hatred and targeting of civilians to tear apart their newly independent country? With 1.6 million people displaced internally and an additional 750,000 having fled the country, how do these purported leaders justify their involvement in fomenting such bloodshed and the resulting humanitarian crisis?
Well, Senator Ben Cardin from the state of Maryland also commented on the situation in South Sudan.
We are concerned about stability in that part of the world, and we are prepared to be generous and invest resources for it to work. But we're going to have to ask hard questions. And that is, looking at the returns, are these investments the best use of U.S. resources? We're going to have to ask hard questions because this brutality just cannot continue.
Well, both warring factions have accused the other of violating a permanent ceasefire signed in the wake of a peace deal inked by President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar. Well, the proposal by the leading contender for the U.S. Republican presidential nomination, Donald Trump, that all Muslims should be banned from entering the U.S. has triggered an angry reaction around the world. And Ridgewell reports from London.
Donald Trump's comments have caused a storm in the United States, which has spread across the globe. In Britain, an official online petition calling for him to be banned from entering the country has gained over 100,000 signatures, meaning it will be considered for debate in Parliament.
We've already banned 84 hate preachers from this country. My view is that what Donald Trump said amounts to hate speak, and therefore my question to the government is, let's consider making him number 85.
Trump said that police fear for their lives in some Muslim neighbourhoods of London. In a rare intervention, Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron and the Mayor of London condemned his remarks as ill-informed and divisive. In Paris, the psychological wounds left by November's Islamic State terror attacks are still raw, but many Parisians condemned Trump's comments.
He should not have a place in American politics.
Merci.
Indonesia has the world's largest Muslim population. Residents in Jakarta were quick to refute Trump's claim that Muslims pose a threat.
Islam sendiri mengajarkan bahwa untuk saling berbuat baik sama sesama.
Islam teaches us to always do good things to fellow human beings. So the comment by Trump is very inappropriate because it reflects an attitude that is against Islam.
Trump has suggested that the United States should have seized Iraq's oil fields and given the money to US military veterans. So his proposal on banning Muslims has been met with anger by Iraqis.
The statements made by Trump are racist and are not in line with principles of American democracy.
The United States offers the largest number of refugee resettlement places in the world under United Nations programs. From its Switzerland headquarters, the UNHCR said this example set by the US is undermined by Trump's comments.
And we are concerned that the rhetoric that is being used in the election campaign is putting an incredibly important resettlement program at risk.
Analysts say that Trump's comments have prompted such a strong global reaction, partly because he is ahead in the polls to win the Republican Party's presidential nomination. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Well, for more news and information, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, the connection between climate change and health. Stay with us.
From science and technology, here's what's new.
It's the spacecraft which will hopefully help clear up the cosmic cloud of mystery that surrounds space, time, and gravity. The European Union agency's LISA Pathfinder spacecraft was launched on the 2nd of December. Its mission, to prove once and for all Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity, or E equals mc squared. His theory, shared with the world 100 years ago, says that to account for gravity, time and space must curve around massive objects like stars, planets, and black holes. This curvature should show up as ripples in the fabric of space-time. These ripples, or gravitational waves, are very faint, and the LISA Pathfinder will test technologies that could one day detect these waves. If this first mission succeeds, there will be a much bigger mission involving 3 spacecraft to finally detect the one constant of the universe, gravity. For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Grossans.
Well, it's time now for today's health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with more news on the connection between climate change and health. Lino.
As the United Nations Climate Summit continues in Paris, World Health Organization officials are calling for a strong agreement to curb global emissions. As VOA's Roseanne Skirble tells us, the accord could help avert millions of deaths linked with pollution and disease in a warmer world.
In Paris, negotiators are aiming for an accord that cuts global emissions to avoid the most dramatic impacts of climate change. World Health Organization senior scientist Darman Campbell-Lendrum says what's good for the planet is good for public health.
And the reason that we are so concerned about the effects of climate change on health are that many of the largest disease problems that we face are highly sensitive to climate conditions. These include diseases such as malaria, such as undernutrition, and such as waterborne disease, diarrhea and other waterborne diseases.
A warmer and wetter world threatens to make these problems worse. That's exactly what's happening with dengue fever, a mosquito-borne viral infection that's put almost half of the world's population at risk. Erwin Saucedo is a local health director in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. He says an extended rainy season in 2009 had workers scrambling to control the epidemic.
We think the 30,000 reported cases could easily be double that, getting to more than 50,000 to 60,000 because of unreported cases where people have done self-treatment.
Dengue fever remains a leading cause of hospitalization in Latin America and Asia. Rising temperatures also make air pollution worse, especially for people who suffer from asthma, heart, or lung disease.
If we continue to use highly polluting energy systems, we will either maintain or increase the 7 million deaths that we suffer every year from air pollution.
Campbell-Lendrum says clean air and water are basic human rights. He says a successful outcome in Paris would be an action-oriented agenda that both reduces climate-changing emissions to protect health in the long run, but also achieves the health benefits of a greener, more equitable, sustainable economy. Roseanne Skirble, VOA News, Washington.
As the Ebola outbreak that started in 2013 spread in West Africa, observers say weak health systems were partly to blame. They say, in general, some African countries' health systems struggle to meet the basic standard of care with a lack of appropriate infrastructures, medical supply, and qualified personnel, among other things. Joining us for more on the subject is Irving Boateng, President and founder of Quality Health Africa, an organization dedicated to strengthening Africa's health system by building sustainable medical facilities, among other things. Mr. Boateng, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Health system is something that we've heard during the Ebola crisis, and we're also hearing it in Paris because government have been urged to strengthen their health system to protect population against diseases that may be linked to climate change. Now, where do we stand in sub-Saharan African countries in terms of strengthening the health system, ideally obtaining a very good care system that can help population?
Right now, when you look at the health system in Africa, it's very, very vulnerable. And I believe Ebola actually exposed how vulnerable the health systems in Africa is. But there is a way to strengthen the health system. It's going to require the government and civil society organizations to come together to really develop the health system from the grassroots and then implement programs that fits the communities, the local communities' involvement in the health system infrastructure.
So starting from the grassroots level, where do we start, really? I mean, how do we do that?
So the main way to start is by building sustainable health centers and then involving the community leaders to serve as liaisons to relay information on health awareness, education, and health practices. You do realize that Ebola really outbroke very, very largely because they lacked awareness on how to detect and prevent the disease. And then we also need a very, very comprehensive infrastructure which involve medical equipment like laboratories in rural areas that can detect diseases and differentiate between a fever and Ebola symptoms. You know, so when these amenities are accessible in the local areas, you realize that we're able to detect and prevent the diseases from spreading throughout the country and then again the whole continent.
So strengthening health system is something that your organization is at least trying to do. This seems like a big mission given all the challenges. What are you doing really?
So right now, Quality Health Africa is focused on strengthening the health system through a variety of programs, but our primary program is building sustainable health centers. You realize that if you have a sustainable health center that has trained medical care providers, that has enhanced medical equipment, and then the right awareness programs available, then the communities from the local level are going to be practicing good health. You know, so we involve the communities such as the pastors, the community leaders, the assemblymen, the chiefs. You know, these are the people that have the voice in the community. So when we teach them how to get the community involved and how to allow them to practice good health, then we are also solving the problem from the ground up.
And you're talking the involvement of community. I know one of the things that some critics have said is sometimes organizations go to countries and they come with a one-stop shop with something that is already set, but it doesn't really fit the needs of the ground.
And that's the biggest problem, because you realize that even in one country, for example, in Ghana, eastern Ghana and northern Ghana are exposed to different environmental considerations that may not require them to have the same health education and health practices. So involving the community allows you to know specifically what's affecting that community. For example, in the eastern part of Ghana, in Bososo, their biggest issue is blindness and diabetes. When you go to the north, it's a different case over there. So involving the community allows you to know specifically what's wrong in that geographical location. Then you come up with a program that is compatible with the community, and then have something set in place for the community to take control of that infrastructure, like a 5-year plan for them to take control and sustain it so that they can connect with the community the way that it needs to.
So you're having some activities coming up?
Oh, yes. So Quality Health Africa, on an annual basis, we have health fairs where we donate several medical equipment and and products to Ghana. So we're having a summit in Ghana December 19th at the Kolibri Teaching Hospital.
Well, good luck with your event. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Boateng. And that was Irving Boateng, President and founder of Quality Health Africa. That's our Africa Health Report for today. Vincent?
Well, Lenore, thanks a lot. And I'll be sure to watch Lenore Madu's Health Reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time for a short break now. Still to come on Africa 54. Lupita Nyong'o dazzles at a Star Wars event in Mexico. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, extreme flooding has left thousands of families homeless in Kinshasa and has killed at least 31 people.
It is my pleasure and honor.
In South Africa, David Van Rooyen has been sworn in as the new finance minister, replacing Handlala Nene. In Guinea, a memorial service was held for the 2 soldiers killed in a rocket attack on a UN base late last November. In Kenya, activists celebrate Anti-Corruption Day, asking the president to do more to end corruption in the country. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Fans packed a Star Wars promotional event in Mexico City to meet the cast of the new movie Star Wars, The Force Awakens. Oscar winner Lupita Nyong'o said a few words on stage and stopped to take pictures with excited fans, with producer Kathleen Kennedy also on hand to welcome excited Star Wars enthusiasts. Nyong'o, who was born in Mexico City but raised in Kenya, says she considers the country to be her second home and admitted that she was glad to be back. Star Wars The Force Awakens opens internationally on December the 18th. While in other Star Wars news, some fans just can't wait. The Force Awakens is awakening fandemonium among some moviegoers. Lines have already formed outside theaters where the latest Star Wars installment opens next week. On Wednesday, one fan had already been waiting outside Hollywood's TCI Chinese Theater for about 100 hours to see the highly anticipated 7th episode. Some fans are hoping to catch a glimpse of the stars at the film's premiere Monday in Los Angeles. Well, and finally, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has been named Times Person of the Year. She's praised by the magazine for her leadership on everything from Syrian refugees to the Greek debt crisis. The announcement came as Merkel was inaugurating a rail line between Leipzig and Erfurt. The 61-year-old German Chancellor is just the 4th woman since 1927 to be chosen, and the first since opposition leader Corazon Aquino of the Philippines in 1986. And that is what is trending today. Well, Africans in the diaspora are busy producing films that cut across cultural backgrounds. This time, Sierra Leonean-born Kang Quintas is the brains behind an emotionally packed film known as Rejected. Africa 54's Esther Guido-Ewart sat down with Quintas and is in the studio to tell us more. Esther?
Vincent, I have to tell you, this is an exceptional film. It captures the reality of life for undocumented immigrants and proves that Africans in the diaspora are not only talented, but well integrated within the American community.
The film's title is Rejected. It is about a young man who moves to the U.S. from Africa, but has no legal status to remain in the U.S. I sat down with Kang Quintus, who acts as Kum, to bring you this action-packed film.
So it's a very, very emotional story. It's a story that reflects the reality of a lot of things that are happening in this country with our health system and the rejection that is going on, being rejected by your family, being rejected by the system, being rejected by everybody around you.
So you mean my asylum has been denied?
In other words, we were unable to approve your application for asylum.
VOA's David Bandy acts as Fidelis, the main uncle to Coombe, who is constantly burning with anger and has no time for anyone.
The money he was getting, in as much as he was a very hard-working man, but most of the money came from fraud, from fraudulent activities. He had this agency, Medicaid agency, wherein he was playing some, what we call in Africa, underhand games, collecting monies here and there where he's not supposed to be collecting.
Desperate and confused, Coombe turns to his uncle Fidelis. His wife and daughter pleads with him to help his nephew, but their pleas fall on deaf ears.
The very last time that I hear anything about Coombe again in this house from both of you.
I asked David what he thought about the character he portrayed.
He's mean to everybody. I don't know if it was the money that was going into his head, but he was mean to everybody. And he thinks that everybody that comes around was actually coming for his money.
Coombe's misfortunes take another twist. The heavy smoker with an on and off cough falls in the bathroom and he is rushed to the hospital by Mirabelle. The doctor has very bad news.
Mr. Coombe, I'm sorry, but you may have lung cancer.
What?
In this leafy suburb, there's one man, Donald Im, who acts as Randy, and his cousin Sandra Fondufe, who acts as Mirabelle.
You have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
With no medical insurance and nowhere to go, he turns to his cousin, who requests Randy to give him a place to stay.
Randy, what are you doing here?
Soon, Coombe begins to meditate.
These images keep popping up in my head, and each time they pop in, I just try to put it down in painting.
When he's meditating, images of the parents, the grandma, and the sisters back home are coming to his head. He starts putting them down in paintings. That's when Coombe realized that he had a hidden talent in him.
Randy helps Coombe get the paintings into an exhibition.
He woke up in the middle of the night and just started painting.
During the exhibition, a lawyer admires Coombe's artwork. He volunteers to be Coombe's attorney and secures his legal status to live in America. Coombe's life has taken a different turn. He goes to medical school and becomes a doctor. But what about his uncle Fidelis?
First of all, it all started with a divorce from my wife. The daughter left, the wife left, the home was taken, and eventually the law caught up with Fidelis, and he ended up in jail.
The film Rejected premiered recently in Washington, D.C. Bandy says,
the feedback was just exceptional. It was just extraordinary because people were so excited about the movie. People saw themselves in this movie. There are people who have lived that life. There are people who have been rejected by the system in this country.
It is a movie that portrays the harsh reality of immigrants in America and other undocumented immigrants in foreign countries. The film producer, Kang Quintus, is from Cameroon. He informs me this film has now been selected for the Los Angeles Cinefest, the Indie Film Festival in Switzerland, and they are talking to Netflix to see if the streaming service can make their film available to subscribers. Vincent?
Well, thanks a lot, Esther. And that's our show for today. Have a good night. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to English in a Minute. When an apple falls to the ground, it does not fall far from a tree. But what does it mean if you say that about a person? Let's listen.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Did you get a chance to meet Shelley's mom while she was in town? The two look like they could be sisters.
Yes, I did. She was so nice, and she talks the same way as Shelley. Clearly, the apple didn't fall far from the tree there.
If the apple does not fall far from the tree, it means two people are very similar. It means a son or daughter seems very similar to a parent. If a friend has many of the same qualities as one of his or her parents, you can say, wow, the apple sure didn't fall far from the tree. And that's English in a Minute.